could have been the original attempt, one of the original attempts. I really would like to see what's at the bottom of that shaft.
Based on numerous recent discoveries this year, the team has good reason to believe that this 80-foot-deep, decayed wooden structure may be connected to the original money pit.
For 230 years, Oak Island has hidden a mystery beneath its soil, a mystery that has consumed millions of dollars, countless excavations, and generations of treasure hunters. But now, an old hidden road may have changed everything. New evidence suggests this may not have been an ordinary road built simply to move people across the island. Its strange construction and direction raise a far more disturbing possibility. Was it actually built to lead someone toward something valuable hidden deep beneath Oak Island? The biggest question is simple. Where did this road really lead? When researchers compare its direction with old maps, underground scans, and mysterious structures detected nearby, an unexpected connection begins to emerge. And if that connection is real, this forgotten road could point toward one of the most important locations in Oak Island's entire treasure mystery, potentially linked to a treasure estimated at $500 million. But Oak Island has fooled treasure hunters for more than 2 centuries. Clues have appeared before, only to end in disappointment. So this time, the evidence will have to speak for itself. Could this hidden road finally reveal the location someone went to extraordinary lengths to conceal? The answer may be closer than anyone imagined. And if you want to uncover this mystery with us, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell icon, because you won't want to miss what comes next. For more than 2 centuries, Oak Island has produced one strange discovery after another. But few clues have raised as many questions as the mysterious stone road. During an excavation on one section of the island, researchers uncovered a long stretch of stones arranged in a surprisingly organized way. At first, it seemed possible that the formation was simply a natural feature created by the island's geology. But as the excavation continued and more soil was cleared away, that explanation became harder to accept. The stones weren't scattered randomly across the ground. In several sections, they appeared to follow a deliberate pattern, almost as though someone had carefully positioned them to create a pathway. That immediately raised a much bigger question. Was this actually a road? And if it was, who built it? And what was it built for? Finding an old road on Oak Island would not necessarily be extraordinary on its own. What made this discovery so interesting was its construction and location. Creating such a substantial pathway would have required considerable effort. Someone would have had to gather the stones, transport them, arrange them, and construct a surface strong enough to be useful. And centuries ago, there were no modern excavators or heavy machinery to make that work easier. So why would anyone invest that much labor into building a road on such a small island? That question began connecting the stone pathway to Oak Island's much larger mystery. Perhaps it was designed to transport heavy materials farther into the island. Maybe the people using it were moving boxes, barrels, tools, or even something far more valuable. Could gold or silver have been transported along this route? Or was the road leading toward a location that someone eventually tried to conceal? As researchers revisited the discovery, the road itself became increasingly important. When its direction was examined alongside older clues and newer mapping data, it appeared that the pathway might be pointing toward something significant. But before that possibility could be taken seriously, there was another question that needed an answer. Why build such a large and carefully constructed road in the first place? The more closely the structure was examined, the less it looked like a simple collection of stones left on the ground. Someone had to collect those rocks. Someone had to move them. And someone had to arrange them into a usable surface. That would have required workers, time, planning, and above all, a reason. This leads to one particularly intriguing possibility: heavy cargo. Could the road have been strong enough to carry large boxes, barrels, equipment, or valuable materials farther into the island? And if that was its purpose, what exactly was being transported, and where was it supposed to go? There is another possibility, of course. Perhaps the road had nothing to do with treasure at all. It could have belonged to an earlier settlement or served some ordinary purpose that has since been forgotten. But even that explanation creates another mystery. Why would an old settlement need such a carefully constructed road on a relatively small island? And more importantly, where did the road actually lead? That became the crucial question. Researchers now needed to determine more than whether humans had built the pathway. They needed to trace its entire route, from its starting point to its final destination. Because if the road eventually connects with an underground structure, an old storage area, or a concealed chamber, then a discovery that initially looked like a simple stone pathway could completely change the story of Oak Island. And this is where modern technology began to transform the investigation. Instead of relying entirely on excavation and historical guesses, researchers could now use advanced surveying methods to examine what was happening beneath the surface. Ground scans, underground mapping, and new survey data offered a way to investigate the island without immediately disturbing everything above it. The first objective was to establish the road's full direction. Exactly where was this stone-built pathway heading? Once that route had been mapped, researchers could compare it with historical maps and records collected throughout Oak Island's 230-year treasure hunt. That comparison produced some intriguing possibilities. Several locations shown on older maps had received relatively little attention in previous investigations. But when those areas were compared with the direction of the hidden road, unexpected connections began to emerge. Suddenly, the mystery was no longer simply about an old road. Researchers had to consider whether forgotten clues from earlier treasure hunters might actually intersect with the same route. Then came another layer of uncertainty. Underground surveys around the road revealed unusual signals and anomalies in several locations. These patterns suggested that something beneath the surface was different from the surrounding ground. But there was still a major problem. An underground anomaly does not automatically mean a hidden chamber or human-made structure. The signals could have been caused by natural formations, disturbed soil, buried stones, or something else entirely. So, at this stage, the evidence was intriguing, but far from conclusive. The real challenge was to determine whether these underground anomalies were connected to the mysterious road. And if they were, the next question would be even more important. Was the road simply an old pathway? Or was it part of a much larger construction designed to lead directly to something hidden beneath Oak Island? Even though these underground anomalies could not yet be identified with certainty, they were significant enough to keep the investigation moving. Then came the first truly unexpected connection. When researchers extended the possible route of the hidden road, its direction appeared to point toward areas of Oak Island that had already played an important role in the treasure hunt. That raised a much bigger question. If this pattern is confirmed, where does the road actually end? The investigation had now reached the question that could determine the entire meaning of the discovery, because finding the road was only the beginning. If researchers could identify its final destination, they might finally understand why someone went to such extraordinary lengths to construct it centuries ago. Using the latest mapping data, the suspected route was projected farther across the island. And that's when the connection became even more intriguing. The road's possible direction appeared to lead toward one of the most famous and mysterious areas on Oak Island, the Money Pit. This is the same area where treasure hunters have spent more than 2 centuries searching for a hidden vault, buried valuables, or some kind of underground deposit. But the investigation didn't stop there. Researchers also began revisiting theories surrounding Smith's Cove and several other historic routes discovered across the island. For decades, one possibility has remained part of the Oak Island debate. Could an old route or underground system once have connected Smith's Cove with areas farther inland? If the newly identified road turns out to be part of a much larger network, then clues that once appeared unrelated could suddenly begin fitting together. And there was another detail making the situation even more interesting. Several unusual underground signals had been detected along or near the suspected route. In certain areas, the scans revealed anomalies beneath the surface that did not immediately match the surrounding ground. At this stage, however, nobody could say exactly what they represented. They could be natural geological formations, they could be disturbed soil, or they could potentially indicate an old structure, passage, or sealed area hidden below the surface. Only physical excavation could provide a definitive answer. But one theory was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. What if the road was deliberately designed to reach one particular destination? Could heavy cargo have been transported along this route before being placed somewhere beneath the island? And if the road eventually connects with a structure created by humans, the discovery could become one of the most important developments in Oak Island's 230-year-old mystery. Evidence beneath the stones. Beneath the dome. As researchers moved their attention below the visible surface of the road, the investigation entered a completely different phase. The stones themselves were no longer the only focus. Now, every layer beneath and around them could potentially contain information about the road's origin. If people really constructed this pathway centuries ago, then the material buried beneath it might help reveal when it was built, how it was used, and possibly why it was created. Some of the most valuable clues could be surprisingly small. Researchers were particularly interested in tiny pieces of wood and carefully collected soil samples. At first glance, these fragments might seem insignificant, but scientifically, they could provide a timeline for what happened in this part of the island. If the wood can be accurately dated, it could help establish when human activity occurred around the road. The soil could provide another piece of the puzzle. By examining the different layers, researchers may be able to determine whether the ground developed naturally over time, or whether someone had previously excavated the area and later filled it back in. Then, there is the possibility of metal. If traces of iron, copper, or other metals are discovered near the road, scientists could investigate whether they came from old tools, transportation equipment, construction activity, or something connected to the cargo that may have once traveled along the route. But there is an important distinction. Finding metal does not automatically mean finding treasure. Its significance would depend on its age, chemical composition, exact location, and relationship to the surrounding material. That is why each sample would need to be analyzed independently before researchers could draw any serious conclusions. Jumping to a major discovery without understanding the age and origin of the evidence could easily lead the investigation in the wrong direction. But imagine if several independent clues began telling the same story. Suppose the wood dates to the expected period. The soil reveals clear signs of human disturbance. Metal traces appear in the same area, and underground scans continue to show unusual structures along the route. At that point, the mystery would become much bigger than simply asking who built the hidden road. Researchers would have to ask an entirely different question. Could the evidence buried beneath these stones finally reveal where the road was meant to go, and possibly bring Oak Island's legendary $500 million treasure mystery closer to its true destination after 230 years? A 230-year-old clue begins to make sense. With the hidden road now attracting renewed attention, researchers weren't looking only at the newest discoveries. They were also going back through the island's long history. Old maps, previous excavations, forgotten observations, and theories that had once seemed disconnected were being examined again. Because sometimes a new discovery doesn't create a mystery. It makes an old mystery finally make sense. Researchers then went even deeper into the records left behind by treasure hunters who had searched Oak Island over the past 230 years. Those historical records contained countless observations that had never been fully explained. Old excavation reports, hand-drawn maps, personal notes, and field records described unusual stones, pieces of wood, strange changes in the soil, and other features discovered during earlier searches. But there was a major limitation. The technology available to those investigators was nowhere near what researchers have today. Without modern scanning equipment or advanced underground mapping, many discoveries could not be properly investigated. Some clues were abandoned halfway through the investigation, while others were simply classified as natural geological features. Now, however, those same discoveries were being viewed through a completely different lens. The team began placing historical maps alongside the newly mapped route of the hidden road. Then they compared previous excavation records with the latest underground survey data, and slowly, possible connections began to emerge. What if the treasure hunters of the past had actually discovered separate pieces of one much larger system, without realizing that the pieces belonged together? One group may have uncovered unusual wood. Another may have encountered a carefully arranged stone formation. A different excavation may have revealed unexplained disturbances beneath the surface. At the time, each discovery appeared to be an isolated clue, but if all of them are connected to the hidden road, then the meaning of those discoveries could be completely different from what earlier researchers believed. And that possibility leads to perhaps the most intriguing question of all. What if treasure hunters have been searching in the wrong place for generations? Perhaps the most important clue was never directly beneath the money pit. Maybe it was the route leading toward it. A forgotten road could have been the key to understanding where people were actually trying to go, and what they may have been transporting along the way. If the hidden road can connect historical maps, old excavation sites, and modern underground anomalies to one specific destination, then the long-running $500 million treasure theory could suddenly have its clearest direction yet. And perhaps the greatest mistake made during 230 years of searching was not failing to locate the treasure. Perhaps it was failing to understand the road that had been sitting in front of investigators all along. The $500 million treasure theory. This brings the investigation to the number that has made the Oak Island mystery even more extraordinary: $500 million. But where does such a massive valuation actually come from? The theory isn't based simply on the possibility of discovering a few gold coins or a small chest filled with silver. The idea is that if a significant treasure was intentionally hidden on Oak Island, it could potentially contain a combination of valuable materials and historically important objects: gold, silver, ancient coins, jewelry, documents, weapons, religious artifacts, and other objects whose historical significance could extend far beyond their material value. If the hidden road was constructed to reach an underground storage area or concealed chamber, then the amount of material transported there could theoretically have been much greater than anyone initially imagined. This is where the $500 million figure enters the discussion. But putting a price on a discovery of this kind is far more complicated than simply weighing gold. Imagine, for example, that a sealed chamber contained several kilograms of ancient gold. Its basic market value could be calculated from its weight and purity. But what if the same chamber also contained centuries-old coins, rare manuscripts, weapons, religious objects, or other historically significant artifacts? Suddenly, their value could extend far beyond the price of the materials themselves. An object, worth relatively little for its metal content, could become extraordinarily valuable because of its age, rarity, provenance, and historical importance. Even so, experts would not simply accept a $500 million valuation the moment something was discovered. There would be several steps before such a claim could be taken seriously. First, investigators would need to prove that the hidden road actually reaches a treasure location. Then, physical excavation would have to establish whether a genuine underground chamber or human-built structure exists at the suspected destination. If artifacts were recovered, each one would need to be identified, dated, authenticated, and carefully documented. The composition and purity of any precious metals would have to be scientifically tested. Historical objects would need to be examined to determine their origin and significance, and independent experts would likely have to verify the findings before any enormous valuation could be considered credible. So, at this point, calling the $500 million treasure a confirmed discovery would be far too early. For now, it remains a theory built around the possible significance of the hidden road and the evidence surrounding it. But imagine what would happen if researchers eventually reached the end of that road and discovered a sealed chamber. And inside were the very kinds of objects that Oak Island researchers have speculated about for more than 2 centuries. At that moment, Oak Island would not simply have revealed buried treasure. It could potentially have revealed one of the largest historical discoveries ever associated with the island, a find that could completely transform the meaning of its 230-year-old mystery. Who built the hidden road? But even before the road's final destination can be proven, another crucial mystery needs to be solved. Who built it? The construction of the road may hold clues about the people who created it, the resources they had available, and what they intended to accomplish. If researchers can determine who was responsible for building the pathway, they may also be able to answer an even bigger question. What were those people bringing onto Oak Island, and what were they trying so desperately to hide? Because the identity of the builders could ultimately provide the missing link between the road, the underground structures, and the treasure mystery itself. One of the first serious explanations points toward the British military. British forces were active throughout this region for an extended period, and military operations often required reliable routes for transporting heavy supplies, equipment, and other materials. So perhaps the hidden road had a much more practical purpose.